What does the Five Nights at Freddy's fan game Final Nights 3 hide from the player off camera? Final Nights 3 is the third installment in this terrifying series of fan games. Based heavily on FNAF 4, as well as sister location, the environments and animatronics you are faced with in this game are nothing short of nightmare fuel. Today we'll be taking a look out of bounds at some things we're not typically supposed to see, including a hilariously distorted circus baby. There's a lot more than that too, so I hope you enjoy this look behind the scenes of Final Nights 3. When you're stuck working night shift in a creepy place, listening to some good music will help the time pass. Luckily Raycon, the sponsor of today's video, has your back. Raycons are awesome because they're wireless, sound great, and regardless of how much you hop around, they won't budge. Jump scares included. And you don't have to pay a ton for Raycon's high-level sound quality. Their smart tech listening earbuds are half the price of other earbuds, so you can get a pair and a spare and still pay less than some of the big brand names out there. And let me tell you, having multiple pairs, like one for traveling, helps out a ton. You can even keep a set with your workout gear. Raycons are also both sweat and water resistant. They're built to withstand those unfortunate times where you maybe left them out in the rain. And with a variety of sharp colors like carbon black, flare red, rose gold, and electric blue, coupled with their passive noise isolation and stereo sound, it's a pretty sweet package. So if you want to level up your audio game, click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/horrorScoped to get 15% off your Raycon purchase. And a big thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. As per usual, I'll do a quick recap of the game so we're all refreshed on what we'll be covering. So the game starts off showing the player arriving at a hospital in the back of an ambulance. From there, you're meant to survive 5 nights in the hospital as you are relentlessly attacked by the Reaper animatronics. You must close the curtains on the Reaper puppet as they approach your door, shut the door on Reaper Balloon Boy's closet when he tries to exit, and turn the thermostat on to prevent Mango from attacking us through the vents. That's not all though, as both Reaper Spring Bonnie and Golden Freddy will make their way down these hallways in an attempt to reach the player. Something else I need to mention is that time doesn't pass automatically in this game either. In order to progress, you must climb into your bed and sleep to reach 6 AM. On night 5, these animatronics are replaced with Shadow Bonnie, as well as Grim Toy Chica and Fredbear. You must wind the spring locks on each of the Grim animatronics, as well as fend off Shadow Bonnie in various locations. After each night is completed, you'll play through a cutscene that contains a ton of lore for this game, and you'll be made to play a game of hide and seek with Reaper Toy Chica. Now that the recap is done, let's take a look at the title screen. Title screens. This game actually has a bunch of unique title screens that change depending on how far we've progressed in the game. One of the first screens we'll see is this one showcasing Reaper Spring Bonnie in the hallway, and they look super creepy up close. If we fly behind the closet in our hospital room, we also find Reaper Balloon Boy just kind of frozen here with his arm extending outwards. Up on the roof though, we can find some pretty interesting things. Here, we will find Reaper Toy Chica and a woman in a Chica Springlat suit asserting dominance as they T-pose beside one another. Right behind them, we can also find the Reaper puppet in their default pose, which kind of looks like they're waving at us. In the back, we'll find the clock that is viewed when the player is sleeping, just floating above the roof. This clock is also present throughout each night. Zooming out on this map, we'll see that the area where all this takes place is a large city, and it's surprisingly massive. Moving on to the Balloon Boy title screen, most of this map is the same as before, except the other animatronics are no longer present, and the puppet is now floating just beyond this rooftop. Unlike the first title screen, however, the puppet is now in this looping animation rather than a static pose. Taking a look at Balloon Boy's closet, it's a lot easier to see him as he moves in and out of the screen. Going inside the closet, we can see him lunge forward as the door opens, and then retract partially into the wall as it closes. Also, in the hallway, we can find Reaper Spring Bonnie just chilling here. So the other screens that take place within the hospital aren't all that interesting. But there are a few menus that are shown off only after the player reaches one of the game's endings. After the Final Night's ending, the title screen shows Spring Bonnie squirming on an operating table in the center of the room. Moving out of bounds, we can see that this map is actually just a small room floating in an empty void. Similar to this, after the bad ending, the title screen shows only a surgical light, as the sounds of an operating room can be heard in the background. Moving the camera back, we can see that this room is mostly empty, aside from this operating table and a single door. Finally, there is the FNAF ending title screen that shows a severed circus baby head on the floor. Now, this screen looks pretty simple at first, but just underneath this room is something hilarious. If we move the camera down below, we'll find Circus Baby's neck stretching all the way down to her T-posing body. and right in front of her neck are her floating eyeballs. I'm not sure what I was expecting when I loaded up this screen, but it definitely wasn't this. That's it for the title screens, so let's move on to the game itself. So once we start the game, we're met with a quick tutorial, which actually has a lot to look at out of bounds. On top of the hospital, we'll find something quite interesting. Just above the clock that I mentioned before, we'll find a stack of 3D rectangles. One of these is blank, while the other 4 have a texture applied that contains the face of an animatronic. These animatronics include Foxy, Fredbear, Toy Bonnie, and Toy Freddy. So the very bottom rectangle is actually placed just above the clock to make it appear as though it's floating in an empty void. As for the others, I never actually encountered them during my playthrough of the game. However, looking through the game files, I found that these objects are labeled as hallucinations. So to my understanding, these objects would flash in front of the player's camera during regular gameplay, similar to how the player hallucinates with the animatronics in the original Five Nights at Freddy's game. If you know what these are used for, let me know in the comments. So moving on to night 1, if we take a look out on the balcony, we can see what the puppet looks like as they're approaching our room. They're just floating here, and each time they move closer, they simply warp into their next position. Back inside, if we don't stop Balloon Boy from leaving the closet, he will climb up on top of our bed where he will prevent us from sleeping. This little lad is slightly less creepy when he's not stalking us from the closet, but he's definitely still creepy. Also, way out in the distance on night 2, we can see that these buildings are on fire, and no matter which way you view them from, the flames are programmed to always face the player. Heading into night 3, it's the same as nights 1 and 2 for the most part, except now we also have to deal with Mangle, who will attack us from the vents. If we fly up onto the roof once more, we will find Mangle and Reaper Golden Freddy up there. It's interesting because, to my knowledge, this animatronic doesn't appear on this particular night. As you may know, game devs will often copy and paste these maps instead of rebuilding them from the ground up, and they could have simply forgotten to delete this guy. Also, taking a closer look at Mangle, they are pretty terrifying. Definitely not something I want lurking around in the vents. Speaking of Mangle, the vent within this map is actually just a small open area within the ceiling. And even though we can hear Mangle as they approach, they don't actually appear within this vent until it's opened. If the player doesn't turn the heat on in time, Mangle will come through this vent and eventually jump scare you. Watching them come out of the vent from another angle, we can see that they simply warp inside of it the moment this occurs. On night 4, Reaper Golden Freddy is thrown into the mix, and things start to get a bit hectic. Moving the camera out into the hallway, we can take a look at this animatronic up close. They operate similarly to Reaper Spring Bonnie as they slowly make their way toward the player. This animatronic stops at the window though, where we must flash them with our light to make them leave. If you don't catch them in time though, they will teleport into the bed while you're sleeping, where they will then jump scare you. Flying up onto the roof, we'll see that it's mostly the same, except now we can find Reaper Toy Chica up there as well. That's really it for night 4, so let's jump into night 5. So as I mentioned before, the animatronics are completely swapped out on night 5. Moving into the hallway, we can take a good look at the grim animatronics with the lights on. And, well, they're purple. Now what's interesting is that within these animatronics, we can actually see the ghostly models that are stored inside. Down below, just beneath this hospital area, we can find Shadow Bonnie waving at us as well. At least, that's sort of what it looks like. This is actually the model that is used when Shadow Bonnie is knocking on the glass door next to our bed. And when the game calls for Shadow Bonnie to appear, they'll be warped up onto that balcony. Speaking of Shadow Bonnie though, when they appear in that little closet, we can see how they just sort of poke their head through the floor. Their arms are also folded and clipping through their own torso. The reason for this is because when you get jump scared by Shadow Bonnie in this closet, their arms detach from their body and grab onto the player. This actually looks really funny from another perspective, as their hands just sort of float around. Right next to this Shadow Bonnie, we can also find Reaper Golden Freddy down here as well. But that's it for nights 1 through 5, so let's take a look at the minigames. So there's a few different endings in this game, and in order to reach the good ending, well, you have to do things just right. This includes winning each and every round of Chica's hide-and-seek minigame without failing. So this game is played after each night, and in it you have to flash Toy Chica with your light depending on which hallway she's coming from. This map is a fully modeled storage area. And if we fly down below during this minigame, we can see that until Chica has moved to one of the hallways, she is simply stored down here. Behind this storage area, we can also find text that says, "Great job, stored out of bounds." When the player completes this game, the camera quickly moves through the wall and zooms in on this text. So during the first few nights, there is this small Fredbear plush hidden within our room. and clicking on it takes us to this arcade area. These minigames simply prompt you to decide between two options, and the decisions made in these arcade minigames will ultimately affect which ending you get as well. If we fly just beyond this arcade cabinet though, we will find each of these screens we will encounter during this minigame floating outside of this arcade area. These screens change depending on which version of the minigame we're playing, and we can even find the characters that appear on screen floating out here as well. Now that we've covered the minigames, let's take a quick peek at this game's cutscenes. So the very first cutscene shows the player arriving in an ambulance and eventually being wheeled into the hospital, and I was really curious to see how this is pulled off. Inside the ambulance, we can take a look at the player's model from another perspective, and they seem pretty unfazed by all of this, which is surprising because this ambulance is actually flying hundreds of feet in the air. It will remain here for a few seconds before it's teleported down into the hospital's parking lot, where the player will then be wheeled inside. This hospital has a handful of rooms in it, and is furnished in the areas that the player will be able to see. If you move down the left hallway, however, you'll see that the building just sort of comes to an end. Now, I'm no architect, but I'm pretty sure this place won't be passing any inspections. Eventually the player is wheeled down the hallway with the game's logo, and this cutscene comes to an end. In the next cutscene, we're walking through the Afton family's house, where we overhear William and his wife, Martha, arguing over the shortcomings of their business, where Martha threatens to shut it down and leave with the kids if he doesn't figure things out. Moving the camera into that room, we can see them having the calmest argument of all time, as they just stare off into space. Taking a look out of bounds, we can actually find the main character, Kevin, and his brother Mike on top of the roof. There's also a small yard area outside the window, but not much else. If we fly over the city that is typically visible through the window, we'll see that it's the same city map that's been used throughout this game. The next cutscene I want to check out is this one, where we're able to freely explore an under construction Chica's party world. Here, we can hear William arguing with a construction worker over safety concerns with Chica's spring-lock suit, and sequentially, their progress on the elevator's construction. Zooming out, we can see that this building actually sits on top of a small hilly plain of grass. There are a few trees surrounding it, but what interested me the most was the elevator shaft. After taking a closer look, however, we can see that it is in fact just an empty shaft in the ground. So the next cutscene takes place within Chica's party world after it has been opened to the public. We can overhear two friends bantering over how terrible the place is, and aside from exploring a little bit, that's typically all that happens during this cutscene. After this, the player is meant to finish Night 5, and upon doing so, they will reach the bad ending. In this ending, the player is laying on an operating table with a surgeon standing over them. They try their best to resuscitate you as you're flatlining, but unfortunately there's nothing they can do, and you're declared dead. Viewing this cutscene from another perspective, it's no surprise they weren't able to save us. The surgeon isn't even holding anything when they zap us. Aside from the surgeon and operating table though, this room is completely empty. But now let's take a look at these other endings. So there are two more endings for us to look at, and in order to access these, you must play each of the arcade minigames, and win every game of hide and seek against Chica without dying. If the player is successful, the doors to the elevator room will be opened during Night 4's cutscene. After the player enters the elevator, who is currently playing as William's daughter Karen, they're taken to the basement area. This area consists of a few rooms and a single hallway, but upon entering this room containing Circus Baby, she will extend her hand to us. If we approach her, she will grab us and pull us into her stomach hatch, and this is what that looks like from another perspective. After completing Night 5, there will be a cutscene that takes place in the scooping room, where the player is stuck inside a Circus Baby. If we do not move, Karen will be killed by the scooper, and we ultimately reach the FNAF ending. From another perspective, we can see that during this ending, Circus Baby just kind of flops down onto the ground violently. However, if we attempt to escape during this cutscene, Circus Baby will flop over to the ground before they can be scooped. Karen gets crushed by Circus Baby though, so they end up dying anyway. The camera is then warped to this other room within the same map, where a spring Bonnie suit is laid out on a table, and William alludes to putting Karen inside the suit. Afterwards, the player is then thrust into an escape sequence where they're meant to leave the hospital while being pursued by Karen's spirit, who has taken the form of Shadow Bonnie. You must also avoid Grim Fredbear and Toy Chica as they continue to pursue you until you reach the lobby. Here you come across a Fredbear plush who is possessed by your mother, who was previously killed by William. She convinces you to let the animatronics kill you as well so you can join them. And then after a jump scare by Shadow Bonnie, we then see that the player becomes the brother, ultimately leading to the final night's ending. I, however, decided to create my own ending by leaving the hospital and noping the heck out of there. But with that brings us to the end of Final Nights 3. We've got one more game in the series left to cover, so make sure you subscribe right now so you'll be notified when that video drops. Thanks for watching, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Cheers!